A huge thank you to those of you who hung in there last week, and welcome now to the final session of our ECIS online leadership conference. As most of you will have read in the accompanying biography, amongst other things, Yong Zhao is a Foundation Distinguished Professor in the School of Education at the University of Kansas and a Professor in Educational Leadership at the Melbourne Graduate School of Education in Australia. He's a prolific writer and speaker, and he inspires and challenges educators to ask big questions to shape the ways in which we guide and facilitate student learning. For example, Professor Yong Zhao provokes us to rethink and refocus on how technology has created a different world and made this world both worse and better for everyone, I quote. That our world is growing and changing is nothing new. This has been going on as long as human history. It's the nature of the change in the times in which we live and the impact this is having and should be having on student learning that is the focus of his explorations and extensive educational influence. As the late Sir Ken Robinson reflected in a 2010 TED talk, reform is no use anymore because that's simply improving a broken model. What we need is not evolution, but revolution in education. This has to be transformed into something else. Well, if that was his thinking in 2010, how much more so are we in need of innovation, change, and a revolution in education today? In their paper, Time to Rethink, Educating for a Technology Transformed World, published in February of this year, G. Williamson McDermott and Professor Yong Zhao explore ideas about rethinking what to learn, rethinking curriculum and opportunities to learn, rethinking where and how to learn, and rethinking the role of the learner, the teacher, and schools. Yong Zhao says, I would like everyone to see the child before they see the curriculum. In a video recording last year entitled The Future of Education, he said, in future education, we will move away from a beautiful flower garden to a really naturalistic nature reserve where everybody is valuable and everybody draws from this uniqueness by contributing to others. It's my very great honor to introduce you to the final guest speaker of our online conference, leadership conference, Professor Yong Zhao.
Well, thank you, Sarah, and my apologies to everyone, ECIS, to all the audience who waited last week, and I understand, what happened. We basically messed up with time, so we're gonna start talking about time. It's interesting. Why do we have so many time zones? It's very interesting to think about this. It's we have time zones, but time zones are not naturalistically set up. When human beings manipulate that all the time. If you go through some countries, they go with geography, they go with state lines. It's actually a very interesting, simple thing. And when I was growing up, I did not know the value of timelines. We didn't even have that. In China, we got the same time zone for all 5 time zones, actually at the same time. Beijing time covers at least 5. Now with that, think about a child growing in different context. A child is always born with probabilities. No matter where you're born, you carry the culture, the heritage, the opportunities, or other things that you're born with. So as I was saying, I was born in China. I did not know the value of timelines. What does it mean? You basically have the same time, but actually, even in China, if you're on the eastern eastmost part of the country, the time gets up very early, and on the west very late. But then I traveled, I discovered people adjust to those things. So imagine the time zones as an interesting concept. We manufactured, we try to really just, we're governed by our invented technology. It is sort of a technology we invented for ourselves, but now we are then governed by that. And it's good, as Sarah's talking about, the invention is good because we can now coordinate time. I'm in US, in Oregon, and you are in London, and I don't know where the audience might be. And we can coordinate, but it's also bad because we, in essence, could not figure out what the right time is. So let's think about that. The schools have been built to serve certain purposes. We have the purpose of the public. Why do taxpayers pay the government to build and run and operate schools? Or many of you may be in independent schools. And why do parents pay? The money is actually, it's quite a lot of money. Why do you do that? In the US, we spend about $12,000 at least a year per student in public schools. In private schools, that amount may go to 20, 30,000. Why? I think, the public good, that is, we want our students to be citizens of a community, of a society. That's the big one. But then at the same time, we have this thing called private good. Private good, that is, you are also laying a foundation for students to be able to thrive in the future. So we have those two things. The two things may conflict with each other. They may be working with each other. And I think the first message is about public good. That is, your students have to become a member of a society. But of course, societies differ today. Societies differ dramatically. And this is, I think, the first thing we need to think about. In our schools over the last probably 30 years, financial or economic success of students, of countries, have taken precedence of how to become citizens. If you look at OECD, PISA, look at the testing of TIMSS, all those things, they're doing math, reading, science, nothing wrong with any of those. But the connection is always this. In the future, you will need math. You will need STEM or science in the new world. You will need literacy. So we make arguments that will pretend to help you to become successful. And that confuses, in essence, the public good and the private good. The public good and private good. So if you go to any country, when they lay out a curriculum, when they create the curriculum, they are confused with basically saying, what does the public need? What does the individual need? So if you think about it, we don't talk about the floor expectation versus the ceiling expectation. So I want to invite all of us as educators to consider this, to say, maybe the public good is only the very basic. That is, depending on the country you're in, you can be in a dictatorial country, you can be in a religious country, you can be in a democracy, it can be in different countries. But the government or the public, if they have the right, in many countries they don't, but if they do have the right, they should be able to say, we would like our children, when they graduate, to know this in order to perform their civic duties in different countries. And that is very basic. Maybe they know how to vote, they know the basic history, and they know how the government works or functions. They know how to hang out and simply dealing with other people. Those are very basic. They should not and cannot occupy the full curriculum for 12 years or 10 years, depending on which country you're in. Then you have this private good. That is, students can be, what can make them successful? Successful is a bad term to define because many people have different views of what success means. What do you mean by successful? More money, more power, or just simple happiness? We don't know. But so I would like to use the term maybe thrive or make a meaningful contribution. That is, your students, when they enter society, they will have something very basic, what I call, I use the term called out of your parents' basement. The reason I use that term because, we, in recent years, we've been talking about something, again, it's a confused term. It's called college and career readiness in the US, CCR. That is, we want our schools for 10 to 12 years to prepare our children to be ready for college and career. It's a very seductive concept because, no parent, no public, citizen would refuse that idea. Do you not want your children to be ready for college and a career? I mean, really, that's just something you cannot reject. But it's an empty and useless concept. Because, imagine how many colleges we have. In the UK, you got Oxbridge. You got, in Australia, you got the Russell's, UK have Russell's 8. You got, also, US, we got over 4,000 colleges. You have the Harvard, Yale, Princeton, then you have the community colleges. And each college, may have, over 1,000 majors. I mean, how can you be ready for so many different colleges and so many different majors? I'm sure, a music major requires different kind of talents, competences, skills, knowledge than an engineer major. And likewise, a literature major will be different than someone who is from, let's say, education or business. So you can't really get ready. And then another thing, of course, we said, we'll get ready for career, career readiness. That's even more impossible, because careers change, jobs change all the time. I mean, let's just look at last 3 years. COVID, the Ukraine conflict, the Russian invasion of Ukraine. You got in China recently, look at the airplane just dropped. The massive change of geopolitics, the conflicts, let's say maybe 10 years ago, and everybody was opening their borders to immigrants to give 5-year visas, 10-year visas. People were happy at that time. Boom, suddenly we're in this uncertainty. And, Elon Musk just bought Twitter. And how is that going to affect our lives? And will Twitter do better or do worse? Facebook, now it's called Meta, was doing wonderful until, kind of going meta. Now it's boom, it's not doing as well. We celebrate heroes, we celebrate companies, but the message is that companies do not predict our future. I think Sarah said right. Sarah, you were absolutely right. Human life has always gone through changes, but the nature of changes is different. And today's change is different from 500 years ago because it's faster, takes much shorter time to recreate the economy. It's also more broadly connected. Globalization, many people say, is dead, but may not be dead. Even we isolate countries like China, Russia, out of this so-called Western, even if we have a Cold War, but this Cold War in human connection is so different from the 1970s. Because human means now you have, as I said, Twitter, you got Instagram, you got Facebook, you got Chinese WeChat, you got text message, you got phones, you got satellite. I mean, it's global. It is, in essence, there's no way for it to be cut off from other places. So I think the big thing is that you think you can predict the future jobs so we can get our kids to be ready for that is simply wrong. So when we call college and career readiness, that's wrong. But governments are still very busy in creating curriculum for the future. The curriculum, again, is public good, private good, required of all students to master so they can be ready for the future. That's why in the US, we have this term called CCR, College and Career Readiness. It's not going to work. It's a big lie. It's a seductive concept. And this is why I was talking about briefly just now, called out of your parents' basement readiness. I think that's a better term. And that really, the idea is that you want your children after education to be basically what we call independent and dependent. Independent meaning that they're financially independent, means they're doing something of value to other people. That's basic things. You know, if you're creating something that's of value to others, you'll be paid. You'll get a basic job. That's not a problem, you know. And that you can be thriving in a coffee shop, you know, like that is, you know, you love serve coffee. It's nothing wrong. My daughter is doing that after getting a degree from Edinburgh. I said, well, University of Edinburgh does prepare better, you know, a barista. You know, that's not, you know, she likes that. She wants to do writing and serve coffee. That's great. You also want children to be socially independent. That is somehow, in some way, they are not causing conflicts. They are not antisocial. They may not have a lot of friends, but at least they can manage their own life. I'm not encouraging everybody to be socialite. You got to work with so many friends. A lot of people, you know, they're happy to be private, you know, but they're still socially, they're not kicked out of their apartments or houses. You know, that's something very basic. Then you want them to be psychologically kind of independent. That is, they're genuinely, they know how to be happy. They know how to be happy. Now that's actually very important. You know, today, after COVID, we have so many people, I mean, this is nothing new, you know, in many countries have a high anxiety and have a lot of psychological, mental challenges, issues. And this is not only in the West, in other countries, the same thing. And even so schools invented this thing called social emotional learning, all those kind of things. I mean, to me, it's simple psychological health. That is, you feel happy, genuinely happy. You feel, you know, but where does the happiness come from? Let's actually analyze all those things. There's three things. How do we get kids to be financially independent, socially independent, and psychologically independent? So the first thing we need to think about, how do you get a job? How do you get a job? So something actually rarely simple. You know, there are many kind of jobs. And now in the US and in many countries, we're experiencing something called the great resignation. And so that means that millions of people are simply quitting their jobs. So they had a job, but they're quitting the job. Why is that? So this financial independence has to be connected to psychological independence. Not only you have a job, you have a job you like. That's it. So comes from two things I just want to highlight. It's more complicated than what I'm saying, but I want to highlight 2 points. One is that every human being has strength, and every human being has weaknesses. That is, out of all your abilities, out of things you can do, you have what you're good at, you have what you're bad at. We call that a jagged profile of abilities or capabilities. That is, you have peaks and you have valleys, peaks and valleys in your ability. You may be good at math, just for example, but not so good with language. You may be great with music, but not interested in, let's say, engineering. But you may have people who is good at musical engineering, but not necessarily in exploring physics. So you have greatness and weaknesses. Then on the other dimension, you have something called passion or interest. Are you passionate about something? Every human being, you know, is born with certain kind of interest in things. So if you combine these two, you can do a very basic analysis. You got 4 diagonals. You got, basic things, 4 areas. So one area is that you're low on ability, you're low on passion. That is, you're not interested, you're not good at. And that's where I advise to say you should avoid those areas at any cost. Okay, that's. But we actually, schools, in the name of the curriculum, push children into that area.
Mhm.
We make our children do things they may not be good at and they may not be passionate about. Then you think about another dimension. That is, you're really good at something. I'm sure you've seen children who's really good at something, but they have no interest in that. As I typically say, well, I call that a job. It's a job. You have to do it, get some money to be financially independent, but then you're not happy. Whenever you can get out of it, you'll get out of it. They have another possibility, which is you're really interested in something, but you are no good. So what I call that a hobby. Okay, you can do it, but Rain, don't try. A lot of us may want to try. Oh, I want to be a musician. I want to be a football player. I want to be, but you are passionate, but you are no good. And that's where we need to think about. It's a hobby. You keep it, you won't make a living of it, you won't be financially independent, but where you want children to go is this area I call you're good at and you're passionate about. That's where I call a career. The career doesn't mean you have to be hired by someone. If you're really good at something, and if you're passionate about it, if you spend a lot of time practicing, improving that, in this globalized world, technology world, you actually can easily get a job. The job may be freelancing. The job may be just doing a little bit job here for someone, a little job there for someone else. Or you could be working for Google, Microsoft, or any big companies, Shell, people find you if you are good. Look at how many individuals, young children, make a lot of money on YouTube. And of course, at the same time, you have a lot of people who don't make any money on YouTube. If you analyze that, it's basically, I call 3 things. Are you good at it? Are you passionate about it? And those things will drive you to be creative, because you cannot copy another person on YouTube. I used to joke about it. I said, how is Kim Kardashian useful to anyone? But she's financially independent, I bet. But if you want to be the next Kim Kardashian, your chance actually is not very good if you just want to copy that, because once you have one Kim Kardashian, you can't have another Kim Kardashian. So you have to be creative. But then there's a third factor, which is what I call opportunity. Opportunity means time. We always call the right time, the right person, the right place. It is, you may be good, you may have passion, but if you are not running into the right person at the right time, or you're not doing the right thing at the right time, that actually may affect you. And of course, we never know. That's another question. We never know when and if you will have that opportunity. So that requires us to create opportunities, it requires our children to be resilient so they can continue to create the opportunity to change their context. So my first really strong message is this. After I said all of this, out of a parent's basement readiness, is not to predetermine children's future with the curriculum, with standards, with testing. I think school leaders, school teachers, parents, and the government systems, or actually systems like the IB, the International Baccalaureate, all of them have tests, have expectations. We use them to define our children. And that can be very problematic. That can be, because a child develops, a child grows in our context. However, in our schools, we have curriculum, we have testing, and this testing and the curriculum predetermine what children should learn, where children should go, and when they should learn what. And if they don't pass the test, we tell them you're bad, you got to do remediation. So we have the child versus the curriculum problem. That is, the challenge. We look at the curriculum, we apply back to children. And right now, almost all schools are determined by the curriculum. So I joke about this. I said, education's biggest problem is that we have children in our schools. Without children in our schools, we probably do very well. You want curriculum? Well, we have curriculum. Another problem is that not only we have children, we actually have live children. Children are live human beings. When we try to say, okay, every third grader should be able to do this, every fourth grader should be able to do this. That's like, we're treating children as basically dead people, and we expect them to arrive at the same time. It's like, throwing birds. If you try to throw a dead bird, you can predict where the dead bird might land. But if you're trying to throw a live bird, it's practically impossible to predict, because whatever force you apply, the bird applies more agentic force. Our children do the same, unfortunately or fortunately. They are live. As live learners, children have learned about three things we need to respect. One is that they are natural born learners. All children want to learn. All children have to learn. Without learning, they would not be able to survive. They have to learn how to manipulate adults to get milk, for example. They got to do something to get you paying attention to them. Children are very smart. When they're born, they're little, they're very helpless. What they do is they have the ability to learn. They may shut down when they come to school because what you teach them may not be relevant to them. So they'll go learn something else. But it's very difficult not to learn. And this is why we got our habit with your smartphones. When you have access to knowledge, it's very hard to resist that. They all want to learn. Second point is that children are intentional learners. Yes, they want to learn, but they want to learn something that's meaningful to them. That's meaningful to them, intentional. So they want to serve a purpose. They want to do something that's valuable to them. And the third one is children are diverse learners. As I have already kind of laid out, early kind of part of my presentation, is that children, each individual child has his or her uniqueness. You can be great or good in some domains, not so good in other areas. And that is not always homogeneous among children. Children have different background, different families, different communities, different prior experiences. Children have different talents. So the talents can be diverse. Some people are good at music, so others arts, others language, others science. Children have different personalities. Some of them are quieter, others are more proactive. Some of them more open to new possibilities, others are less. You have children there. Children have different desires. Some people are very interested in pursuing power. They want to influence others. You have other people who are more interested in curiosity, knowledge. They want to know. You got all those children. Then you combine that with background. You got very diverse children. So when they come to your school, we have one curriculum. We want to force all the children to learn, and they want them to learn at the same speed. When they that's just wrong. So what I've spent so much time on this point is we have to go back to help children have this financial independence. So you develop abilities that you can serve other people. So let's ask ourselves, in our schools, are we preparing our children to solve problems that are significant to other people. So people are willing to pay you. This is the private good. So ask our children, do they know what to do? We ask them to learn. Then we pretend learning has a purpose, right? We say, okay, yeah, if you did this, by the time you graduate, you'll be able to go to Oxford or Cambridge or anywhere. And after that, you get your degree, you'll find a job, as if somebody was waiting for you to graduate to get a job. It's not the case. So what are we going to do to help our children to learn, to find problems worth solving and solve that problem while learning? So today we want to say this, when you try to solve a problem, it's a learning process. We don't really predetermine you to solve problems. This is why we call knowledge is not that important, because you can find it. There's competencies. That is, you can identify a problem, you can solve a problem, but all the identification and solving are all part of the process of learning. Like right now, we get better by doing something. Because when you're doing, you're learning from other people, from existing books, from knowledge. I think a lot of schools don't do that. We still have this readiness idea. We will get you ready to do something. Like people say this thing again, I think it's a silly thing. They say, well, if you cannot run, if you cannot walk, how can you run? I said, well, think about it. You have to walk to run, but it's a learning process. You cannot say, okay, well, we are talking about solving problems, identifying problems, is that you will learn to do that. It's not, we say you cannot run, because of course it's, if you put a juxtapose like that, it's right. But at the same time, how do you learn to run? You have to learn to walk. Why don't you get started with walking? So that's the very interesting thing. The second thing is this. We talk about social and financial. I'm sorry, about psychological. Social independence. In schools, we've been trying to teach collaboration. A lot of people think collaboration, cooperation, for cooperative learning has been in existence, God, for 30, 40 years. And teaching collaboration has been very important in the 21st century skills. But a lot of times, the way we teach it is actually wrong. We teach you to collaborate. But if looking in many schools, I've seen a lot of schools doing project-based learning. There's no collaboration. There's repetition. You have a school of children, let's say 5, 6 children working together on the same project. In essence, they're doing the same thing. They are doing this. They're not learning to collaborate. Collaboration, in my definition, is called social intelligence, or in an even simpler term, is called outsourcing your weakness. Outsource your weakness. What does that mean? That means in work, in school, who can help you and why that person would help you. And how you can help others. It's called social intelligence. You don't have this little tactics, strategies, everybody learn the same way to collaborate. I think that's just silly. We collaborate in different ways. So a simple example is this. When I was growing up in the Chinese village, I was tiny, small. I was bullied all the time. So I became quite intelligent. I found a big guy, very tall guy. He hated school. So I said, okay, why don't you beat those guys up and I will do your homework. That's perfect collaboration, right? So we outsource weaknesses and intelligence. And right now the same way, you've got children. If you have a book project, a child is great at designing the book cover. Another child is doing the content. Why don't you have them develop their strength? The person does the book cover does better in art. Another person does better in writing. So you develop the uniqueness of human beings. So that's the social intelligence. It's understanding where do you get knowledge, where do you get help, where do you work with others. The psychological happiness, independence really comes from today we have a branch of psychology called positive psychology. In positive psychology, what makes people happy is very simple. Number one, you have autonomy. That is, you can decide or you can choose what to do. You feel you have volition over what you want to do. Second thing we call mastery. That is, you feel you can control, you can learn, you can be better of your own product, your work. And number three is relationship. That is, you're doing this for somebody. You have to belong to a group and other people belong to you. This intertwined social relationship. So if you combine those things, in essence, what makes people psychologically happy is to use your strength, your signature strength and passion to create value for other people. That's something actually fairly simple. It is that you feel needed by others. This is something really important. I think we don't do that. You feel, why do, Durkheim talked about why do people commit suicide? It is a way basically to cut, you feel like you are being cut off from a lot of people. You don't feel like being connected, being needed. Why do people resign from jobs? Again, the big resignation is that, again, you don't gain that intrinsic motivation from the process. So now if you bring all of this back, if you're able to solve other people's problems and learn to do it, get better and better, and you develop the unique greatness in your skills, in your passion to help others, that is quite powerful. You will be well reserved and be well rewarded. Actually, if you can do something, solve some problem, you really shouldn't have to worry about getting a job. Nowadays, getting jobs to survive is very easy. Doing the right job that makes you happy is hard. So when you're creating value for others, then that also solves your problem of anxiety, of mental health issues, of psychological issues. If you're doing wonderful things, other people need you. Psychologically, you feel happy. And socially, you feel rewarded. You're connected with other people to the degree you want. So that is really three simple things. And I remember this. This is happening with myself. I said, I was born in a tiny Chinese village. My chance of being able to sit here to speak to you is one probably in a million, because I was born in 1960s. I've been doing this kind of work since 1985, been teaching. I'm almost 60-year-old. I was reflecting on that. How did that break my probabilities? Well, I didn't break it. It just happened, but in my village, nobody else did what I did. And was really the real reason was that I was really bad at my village stuff. In the 1960s, the Chinese were in great cultural revolution, was basically damaging everything. People were working as a unified like military and ran as slaves almost practically. People were dying, starving in my village. But in my village, the village curriculum would be driving the water buffalo. And I was really bad. And I did not try to get better. So that's where my father said, well, why don't you go to school since you're so bad at farming? And that was really powerful. So think about our students. Where do you get your ability? Everybody's good at something. How can our schools create more opportunities for everybody? To allow them the possibility of exploring, of finding their ability, their talent, natural born or cultivated. The same thing happened to my son, actually. He went to a college, it's about 10, 15 years ago, and very expensive. So I said, what are you going to study? He said, I would study economics. It's a very good Chinese choice. It's economics, to be a banker, get a lot of money. But after 2 years, he came back saying, I'm not interested in economics anymore. I said, why? He said, well, my math is not good and not as good as other people. And, that's, of course, breaks the myth that all Chinese are good at math. It's not necessarily true. I was horrible at math. That's why I chose to study English. So I said, what are you going to study now? I said, well, I'm going to study art history, art and history. That's probably the worst in terms of probability. You say, arts people don't find jobs and historians don't find jobs, but art history is kind of worse. So I said, as a very open-minded educator, learning from my father, I said, well, if you want to study art history, that's fine. I said, but when you graduate, you cannot come back to live in my basement. So that's called out of your parents' basement readiness. And luckily, he was really into art history. He was very good, and he reached out to all kinds of people he wanted to learn from. He got a job right away after college, and then after a few years in his job, he was actually in an arts club. He was doing exhibitions and doing assistants. After 3 or 4 years, he applied. He wanted to do more. He wanted to do research. So he went to Stanford University, all paid by the university, to do a PhD in art history. Even before he graduated, he's already had a job at Yale University, doing in the Yale University Museum, work on that. He's going to defend his dissertation next month. So all my message was saying, there are probabilities, but probabilities do not apply to individuals. So you can always redesign and redefine your idea. So that's really the second message to educators. In reading education research, there's always a lot of data, a lot of evidence trying to predict the probability of some children. Like say, okay, in London, I know I went to some schools in London, some quite bad schools. Government, some educators have an expectation. Says this schools, these children are going to cause trouble. They're immigrants. They're not going to, achieve very high. So we have a side of kind of stereotypes against them. Stereotypes is a form of probability. So we do not expect. So what we do is that, well, you cannot read. I got to make you read more. And then you're basically depriving children of the chance to explore, to find, to become better at what they're good at or they're passionate about. We need to really change that. We need to look at every child to say, what are you good at and what are you passionate about? That is something. And then in schools, another message we do is we always try to teach. I think it's time that we forget about teaching. We should become how I support learning. As I mentioned before, autonomy. Students need autonomy to make decisions. So they need to make some decisions. We need to give them that opportunity. And when they're making decisions, we need to guide them to solve problems for others. This is key. We need to start all learning by involving our students to identify problems worth solving. Every family, every community, every school, every nation, and the globe has too many problems. We shield our children from these problems. It's no good. They need to be involved. So they need to start by asking, I want to solve a problem. But what problem you can solve? There are many. There are like communities, maybe the traffic lights are not working very well. Maybe our cafeteria is too crowded. Maybe our children from different races, ethnic groups don't get along well in schools. And maybe our society is so divided by Boris Johnson, I know, or right now by anybody else, Scholz, talking from Germany, So we could have all those, but why don't we just try to find the problems to solve? Then when students bring a problem to you, my suggestion is always to say, okay, ask them 3 things. Why this problem? Why is it worth solving? Children have to have prepared answers for that. And second question is, why do you think you can solve this? Why you? Why do you think, what makes you special to solve this problem? And third one is, why now? Why do you think it's a good time to solve this? If you ask students to prepare presentations of this, just exploring those problems, will train their mind to be much more disciplined in gathering information, in being creative, also in owning their own learning. That is really what I think the future should be. Teachers should change their roles to support students to become owners of their own learning. And today, if you want to summarize, after COVID, we've gained a lot. I'm sure a lot of death, that's sad, a lot of lockdown, a lot of crazy behavior, but we were dealing with really a new disease. So there's a lot of innovations, a lot of inventions. Today, if you look at education, a lot more children have experiences with online learning, with learning that's outside school, with learning that's not happening in the same physical location with teachers and students. A lot more teachers were creative. Every teacher had to experience a lot more online teaching. A lot more students, a lot more teachers had better access to technologies. Again, I'm not saying all children do, but that's, we purchased more equipment, we had better connections. A lot more content of learning has been added to online. A lot more schools have a lot of experience with organized online learning. I know we're trying to get back to school, trying to be normal. Parents and government officials may hate online schools because it just disrupted their life. But COVID was disruptive. But today, we truly live in a society where learning has escaped the education system. Learning can take place anywhere. Now, when you bring students back to school, when you try to engage them in learning, we need to make learning more intentional. So how do we help our students to become owners of their own learning and take advantage of all available online? The global learning resource, the global connections with other students. And how do we prepare our children to create a better future, to help them to get out of parents' basement? That's really the challenge. So to end, we have come to a different time. COVID has changed our lives. The new geopolitics have changed. And now our children who will enter society, they will create their own future because their future is uncertain. And by the way, their future is our retirement. So we should be careful. We want them to build a better retirement for us. It's that. And we need to rethink education from the point of the child, not the point of the curriculum. We need to think about education as a way to enhance humanity, how human beings get along with each other, how human beings respect each other, instead of treating education as a way to enhance your global competitiveness. It's not about competition. It is about a good way to use my strength to enhance your life, use your strength to enhance my life, so we can value the individuality and uniqueness of each other. Thank you. Sarah, thank you. That was a great monologue. It's too long, but I feel like I had so much to share.
I think I froze just at that moment. So as you just finished that, so I hope I'm back again now. Thank you so much for these really important and fascinating thoughts. This is just so helpful to just listen to what you've been describing to us. I think particularly this very last point of, we're not educating to compete with one another. We're educating to enhance the life of others. I remember hearing Howard Gardner speaking probably about 15 years ago now, where many of the things that we've torn to shreds about his multiple intelligences, I still hold to what he was talking about in terms of these various different intelligences, none of which actually are any use to anybody if we don't include the ethical element. And I love that image that you gave us of the garden in your recorded talk of last year. But this idea of enhancing the life of others, that what we're doing in our why and why you and why now in our students, if our purpose is about authentic learning and about problem solving and a solution focused approach to what we're doing, always in mind that idea of the ethical element of, I can't do any of this just for me, I need to be doing this for somebody else. So thank you very, very much indeed. I think some of what you had to say was importantly alarming, if I can put it that way, thought-provoking and inspiring. And thank you for challenging us to think about some of these big questions. I think we need to ponder these carefully, and I think we do need to act upon them and move from talking about learning rather than teaching, but now moving towards action. And I'd like to mention that at our face-to-face conference, the leadership conference, ECIS and NIASC leadership conference earlier this month, many educators, many school leaders made a pledge to one way in which we might commit to take one small step towards changing our schools and institutions to becoming more inclusive and embracing diversity, and to valuing equity and striving towards justice. It was powerful. We wrote them on little cards, and we've collected these, and we'll be publishing some of those pledges. And I think for education to be relevant and meaningful, transformational and learning focused rather than teaching focused, we need to ask ourselves uncomfortable questions, and we need to act collaboratively and for the greater good for others. So yeah, the last hour that has been so fascinating to hear your thoughts, taking us through this wonderful journey of reflection and really a call to action. You also, give the impression, and these are also things that you've said in statements that you've made, I think, before, that you do have faith in educators who, given the right circumstances, given the right support and resources and opportunities, that you do have faith in educators being able to create experiences that do engage and inspire and embolden our students to be able to make meaning of their own learning. And with this faith in educators and school leaders, we have the courage to be able to be hopeful about our uncertain future. And so thank you for your empowering and motivational words today. And on that very high note, I'm going to thank all of our participants and presenters from this conference. We've had such rich material to take with us into this weekend and into coming weeks to motivate change. So with the heads of schools I've been talking to recently, I'm going to mention a couple of names: Juliet from Erdvik and Kathleen Nagley, for example. I've had some fascinating conversations recently about school heads who want a revolution in the ways in which schools are moving learning forward, and who want to follow up on the kinds of rethinking and refocusing that you, Yong Zhao, have inspired in us today, and who want to stop just talking about it and talking about students, but have students representing themselves. And I think I think this has been an extraordinary part of our sort of conferences of the last weeks. We had a couple of students, for example, from the International School of Helsinki, live at our face-to-face conference. They were 14, 15-year-olds, they were ninth graders. And their presentation to school leaders and teacher leaders, whatever, leaders in education, had something important to say. And they were quoted throughout the other presentations in the conference. I think we are living in a time now, as a result of the things we've been talking about, where we can take seriously the fact that students need to be leading the change, and they have a voice and they want choice. They want to be able to talk about the development of their passions. This is exciting, I think. So yeah, we want to stop just talking about it. We want to get on and do something about it. And Juliet from Erdvik published in our ECIS Insightful last month in March. So I'm going to invite all participants to check that out. And if you're inspired to take action with us, then please let us know at ECIS so that we can collaborate in meaningful action for change. So thank you now to our face-to-face conference sponsors, NEOM and Stendon University, and our online conference sponsors, NEASC and CRS. And I also want to say that we're most grateful to our Executive Director of ECIS, Cam Chauhan, and to the CEO of NEASC, Jeff Bradley, for their bold leadership in partnering to create face-to-face conference where we're not in competition with one another, but that we are enhancing the lives of others by partnering to create this face-to-face conference that we had a month ago, and now this online conference that reflect the DEIJ lens through which we are striving as organizations to move forward for the education of the future, or actually for now. So we have 43 recorded sessions which participants will have open to them for the next couple of months, so that you can continue the learning. As you know, ECIS values ongoing, transformative and sustainable professional learning, rather than a silver bullet where we all go back to our default behaviors on the Monday morning. We keep the learning going, where our conversations continue with one another. And many thanks to everyone for your important contributions to these conferences. We look forward to seeing you at our upcoming events. And I wish you all a very lovely weekend. And to Professor Yong Zhao, thank you so very much for this inspirational end to our conference. Bless you. Thanks. And have a lovely weekend for you too.
Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now.